Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Just gotta thank the patrons. Thanks to Alan, Billy, Blizz, Brett, Caleb, Chen, Christoph, David, Edia, Eric, Gary, Joey, the other Joey, Christopher, Matthew, Miguel, Mike, Mathaldu, Raymond, Rodrigo, Sakchief, and Z. If you want to support me, the links are in the description. Enjoy the video. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to talk to you about London detective Mysteria today because people like it when I rant on about visual novels that I've played, apparently. So, this is an Otome game that has been released by XC. This appears to be their first foray into Otome, specifically. So, I thought this would be interesting to take a look at. Plus, the actual plot seemed to be pretty interesting in the way of being set in 19th century London alongside the sons of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, or is it Dr. Watson? I think that was it. And bloody Jack the Ripper and what's his face, Lupin the Third. But I'm going to tell you now that I don't like this game very much. I gave it the best shot that I really had time for, which was I played all the way through to Watson's ending. And then after having gone through that and just having a look at all the other endings being summarized on the internet, I kind of got unlucky and assumed that the rest of the game was going to be as droll as that ending. And apparently Lupin's ending is really good. But yeah, I basically read up on all the other endings, including the true ending, which you need to play through every other route to go through. And we'll get onto that later because that's spoiler territory. So the first thing I want to actually talk about with this game is its detective stuff. Now, the basic plot of the game is really simple. You are Emily Whiteley, or as they pronounce it, Emily Whiteley. Everybody in this game has hilarious English pronunciations, and sometimes they don't get it right. It's just adorable. But yeah, as I was saying, so basic plot. You are Emily Whiteley. You eavesdropped on a meeting with the Queen that ended up with you getting her special ring, although it turns out that your mother was not so much related to Queen Victoria, but was a friend of Queen Victoria, and so you end up getting a ring that helps you become a detective, and you end up going to detective school. And it's at this point you can fall in love with one of 5 boys, because of course. And there is also this background mystery going on about who killed your parents. And again, we'll get onto all of that stuff later on. But I want to talk about the detective stuff because the game kind of emphasizes towards the very beginning the sort of things that a detective would need to know. Like being observant and keeping an eye on everything, all that. They even introduce a neat little mechanic called voice line saving, where you can save individual voice lines in order to refer back to them later in order to help figure out a mystery. I'm going to tell you something now though, none of that shit is ever relevant. So the way this works is there are multiple little detective stories going throughout the there are multiple little detective stories going on throughout the game that you end up stumbling into just due to being in a bloody detective story. And most of them are very simple mysteries that you can figure out as soon as you get all the information that the game is willing to give you. And the thing is, the first couple of ones that you have to do, and by the first couple I mean like 3 or 4, you don't do anything. You just sit there and watch it happen. There's no sleuthing going on. The game basically hands you the solutions on a silver platter. Then there's a couple afterwards that give you like a couple of choices you need to make, but the choices are usually brain dead simple. And once you've made the right choice, you get a little bit of extra detective rank. However, most of the choices you need to make to get detective rank, and I assume the detective rank determines whether or not you get a good or a bad ending on a certain route, those choices are actually really simple. And the only one that is a massive pain in the neck is this one where you have to determine what a piece of writing says. But the person who wrote it down doesn't know how to write English letters, like at all. You could not tell they were English letters at all, and it was unbelievably unfair, so I basically just had to guess. But yeah, other than that, the only real sleuthing that you do is picking out 1 or 2 correct answers and getting a little bit of a prompt telling you whether or not you were right or wrong, and that's the entirety of the detective work you do in this game. Don't come in expecting any sort of gameplay whatsoever. This is full-blown Otome, but I think they would have done better if they had at least some kind of detective stuff going on, because Yeah, even the little thing that lets you save the lines is kind of useless because you can't pull it up when you're making a decision. And the worst part is you've only got 10 seconds to make a decision, but thankfully the game does let you jump back and forth between decisions without penalty. So if you get it wrong, you can just go back and get the right one, and it doesn't really affect much. So it's not like it really matters if you do it at all, honestly. So if you're coming in expecting any kind of actual detective work, you're going to be disappointed. It's basically full-on visual novel style stuff, which is okay, I suppose, but they kind of just make out that it's a big deal at the beginning of the game and then do absolutely nothing with it until just before the route split, and then after the route split, they just kind of drop it again. So, yeah, I don't know what to tell you on that one. Honestly, I was kind of disappointed because I was hoping for at least a little bit of light detective work, but everything they put in front of you is so easy to solve. It feels dull. Like, it's an actual detective story without any real detective stuff going on, and it's disappointing. So, let's talk about the actual plot, the actual visual novel stuff. So the setting is 1900s England, and it looks pretty good. Like, the background art is actually really nice of the streets of London and of certain objects and stuff like that. It all looks really nice. However, the sprites go from anywhere from reasonable but uninteresting to unbelievably ugly. Something is wrong with Emily's sprite. Emily is the main character, if you've already forgotten. Something is wrong with her sprite. I don't know what it is, but she just looks really fucking weird to look at. I don't know exactly what the drill is with that one, but it is really, really strange, and I just don't feel right looking at it whatsoever. They say they got a new artist versus the original PSP release of this game. With that said, though, yeah, it probably should have stuck with the old artist. I don't even know what the old art looks like, but I'm pretty sure it would be better than this. Well, I will say something for Emily, though, at the very least. It's not like the protagonist character from the last game like this I played, which was Call Across Malice. She's not brain dead. She actually does do a little bit of detective sleuthing for herself, and outside of a couple of, silly girl moments, she is generally competent. I say that with a little bit of a aside, though. She has this annoying tendency to get kidnapped a lot, or grabbed and have a knife put to her throat. That happens 4 times. I don't know why she has such a tendency to end up with a knife to her throat, but that is something that happens a lot. I'm not entirely sure why. You'd think one of the boys would give her bloody combat lessons after the second time, but, well, it just doesn't happen. She is meant to be a lady of high status and something like that, so she probably wouldn't like getting her hands dirty, but at the same time, you'd think she would be willing to learn, but apparently not. So, yeah, she isn't a bad MC at all, and I didn't feel anywhere near as bad playing her as I did someone else. At least she's not even really that interesting, if I'm being perfectly honest, but she's at least competent and good at what she does, so I'm not really annoyed following her around, more or less. So, there you go. The 5 boys, however, are all a bit different. The 2 most interesting characters in the game, at least on your first run-through, and I'll explain why this is a thing shortly, are Holmes and Watson, because they get the most time to develop. They come in very early, and they get the most time to really express their personalities. Holmes is a bit full of himself, although thankfully he's not like that one guy in Call Across Malice, whose name I can't remember, who is also intensely full of himself. And Watson is actually pretty overly friendly, and again, they say in the game that he's basically the foil to Holmes. I believe his name is Sherlock Holmes, and then William H. Watson. Those are their full names in this game, so it's not like their fathers. With that said, though, yeah, Holmes is a bit full of himself, but he does slowly snap out of it throughout the game, more or less. And yeah, they are 2 relatively interesting characters, although the one I ended up with was Watson, because he was the only one I really thought was actually worth the time going down his route. And his backstory ended up being just, nothing. His entire story... Alright, I'll stop talking, I'll wait until we get to spoilers for that one. But yeah, they at least get some decent time to develop, and they're the two most interesting people of the bunch because you got the most time to attune to them. They get the most time to express themselves and learn what they're like. The other three main characters are basically nobodies because your three other characters are Jack, aka Jack the Ripper, Lupine, aka Lupin the Third, the Thief. I think it was Lupin the Third's a Japanese anime series, isn't it? No, I'm thinking of, I think he's like the son of the other Lupin. Everybody is the son of somebody else in this one. It's a bit weird. But yeah, you get those two, and then you get a third character whose name is, Akechi, and his mate, who isn't actually a rat in this game, whose name I can't even bother to remember at this point. But yeah, the problem with these three is that none of them get any time to really express themselves before the route split. This is kind of helped out by the fact that Lupin and Jack, you can't actually go down their routes until the end of your first playthrough. So even if you find the two even remotely interesting, which I didn't, even if you find them remotely interesting, you have to wait until you go and play with one of the other characters and then come all the way back around and start again in order to actually go and play as them. Play as them, what the fuck am I talking about? Go and romance them, which is just disappointing because you think those would be the two most interesting characters in the game. Like, you've got Jack the Ripper. I mean, do I have to say anything else other than that? Being in a relationship with Jack the Ripper while you and him are in a detective school, great idea. Couldn't be bothered to go get it because I had to play one of the other dudes first. And Lupin, who doesn't actually get to appear to be anyone other than just a hopeless little dipshit. Like, that's the only way I've got to explain Lupine's character, is that all he does is stumble around and make an idiot of himself. Every time you see him throughout the story. Every single time. And so he looks like a really, really uninteresting character other than just being a klutz. So, I don't know. It's just so weird. Like, hear me out here. You would think that the route before the route split would be the point where you want all the characters to introduce themselves, start showing off hints that they're deeper than they appear, and then make it so that you really have trouble making a decision once you get to the route split. But in this game, you don't get that with 3 of the 5 characters. You don't get it with Jack because he is basically just a brick wall. He doesn't tell you anything. He just appears a little bit brutish and uninteresting throughout the entire game, and not much else. Then you've got Lupine, who again appears to be a complete klutz, dumbass, and just train wreck of a person in general. Obviously meant to be a cover for his gentlemanly thief sort of persona. Oh, and by the way, it's incredibly obvious that Jack the Ripper looks like Jack from the classroom, and Lupine looks like Lupin the Thief, but nobody notices, which is incredibly bizarre. Like, it's like the whole trope of Superman taking off his glasses and suddenly becoming entirely unrecognizable. It's incredibly dumb, but the game just kind of rolls with it. And it just bugged me in the back of my head. But yeah, again, just in general with those two, they have no time to really appear interesting at all. Akechi, who is the 5th person and is the weird little fish out of water sort of character, but he comes in really close to the route split to begin with. Like, everybody else gets like a few hours worth of game time at least. He comes in like a few scenes away from where the route starts to split, and all the choices to make him the guy you go with are all loaded at the end there. So if you've been focusing on, say, Watson, for example, you have pretty much no chance, as far as I can tell anyway, of going down the Akechi route. At least not the first time. I'm guessing that's the way they wanted it to be, but I'm just pointing out that it's really bizarre that he comes in so close to the route split, and therefore gets no time to appear as anything other than just someone who immediately falls in love with Emily as soon as he gets off the boat from Japan, and just kind of stays that way the entire time. Now, admittedly, once you've gone down the route split, at least in Watson's case, he actually does get a bit more character time, where he appears to be a bit more of the strong silent type. But, I mean, other than the fact that he can fight pretty damn well, he gets basically no character development whatsoever before the route split. And again, it just frustrates me when they don't take the time to make it so that you feel like the choice is difficult. I did my video on my top 5 games just like 20 minutes ago, but for you it will be a couple of days. And I did my video on Muv-Luv being my game of the year of 2018 very recently. And the thing about that is that you had plenty of time to get used to everybody before the routes well and truly split. So it would feel so bad. Like, you'd feel so bad picking one over the other for obvious reasons. And even then, in bloody Muv-Luv Extra, you get like 3 other characters you could go and romance as well, and you still feel bad about rejecting them, especially towards the end of Unlimited. With that said, though, yeah, this game just does not do that well, and I did not feel for any character except like Watson and Holmes, which is a really, really bad thing in my personal opinion. But yeah, so my opinions on the 5 characters. Holmes, bit full of himself, but still relatively interesting, does have a bit of a father complex going on, and is arguably the most interesting character of the bunch, just personality-wise, but I didn't pick him. I picked Watson because he was a really nice guy, had a fair bit of his own baggage going on, and was just a relatively interesting character in general until the actual route split. Jack the Ripper, Lupin the Thief, and Akechi the love-struck bastard didn't really get enough time to actually endear themselves to you before it came time to split the routes, and therefore I didn't really feel that interested in them. So I played through the Watson ending, and we're going to get into spoilers from here on in. So if you actually are planning on picking up this game, here's my opinion on it. Don't bother. I don't think it's worth the time. And one of the reasons is actually coming up because spoilers. But yeah, as I said, not really worth the time, but off you go if you don't want them. But Watson's ending is actually really damn boring. For the most part, it's literally just your incredibly typical protect your lover from any kind of danger sort of thing, only when, give them a little bit of freedom, eventually wins out in the end and all of that. And I was so bored reading through it because the majority of the dramatic content they had going on for the romance here was a memory back from the childhood of the two of them, where it's kind of meant to be a secret between the two of them, that it was about each other, but it's not because it's incredibly obvious and it's just really boring to read through, and I ended up skipping through most of the dialogue and text in this area, and I still managed to keep up with it. And I did not care. At the very end, I did not care. I lost the ability to care. There is no such thing as a to-care bird. There is a toucan bird, but there is no to-care bird. So, yeah. By the end, I just lost interest entirely. At the very end of the game, they told me that I unlocked the ability to romance Jack the Ripper and Lupin the Thief, and it had also unlocked an epilogue, which I did not bother reading because I could not be asked at this point. So I ended up Googling to see if anyone else had actually done any sort of ending summaries yet, and someone actually did. They'd actually gone and played the Japanese version way back in 2016 and just typed up a gigantic summary of every single ending in the game. Everyone's individual endings, judging purely by this, are okay, although they're all different. It's that sort of thing where once the route splits, suddenly time gives everybody a completely different set of events that still somehow ends up with all of them all taking down pretty much the exact same dude. Feels weird, but yeah, there you go. It's alright though. From what I read, everything is about to be expected, both in the regular endings and then the epilogues afterwards. For the most part, they're fine. With that said though, there's a true end. You get the true end by playing through everyone's romantic story and then by doing all the epilogues. And the true end appears to be like the actual canonical, this is how it actually went down end. And apparently in the canonical end, you don't actually fall in love with anybody, which A, kind of sucks for people who are invested in the story, but B, it's bad for a bunch of other reasons. So yeah, it's a stinker because what happens is that everyone ends up splitting up. A couple of characters end up getting some really, really bad endings for some reason, and they tease the sequel. This game originally came out in 2011 on PSP. Sequel never came out. So you have this ending where, despite this game being an Otome game, Emily doesn't actually end up picking any one of the characters in particular. So if you're particularly attached to one character, you're probably not going to like the fact that they just end up walking away from this whole thing. Jack gets the short end of the stick because he ends up being fucking kidnapped. I don't even know why they went through with that. Everybody else just goes their separate ways. And there's this whole plot going on with, as I said before, with the people who assassinated Emily's parents. And despite the fact that it looks like it's about to actually get resolved, it doesn't actually get resolved, and it's left for the sequel, which never happened. So, other than getting introduced to these characters and getting to know them at least a little bit better, although again, if you're judging purely by the pre-split, not great. You'd have to go through all 5 endings to really get the character depth that you would want out of this sort of game. Yeah, it's just bad. Like, it really is just kind of bad. And I'm really happy that I didn't play through all 5 endings and all 5 epilogues just to see that true end, because oh my god, that would have absolutely killed any interest I had in giving this an even remotely positive review. So yeah, that's pretty much all I've got. I did not like London Detective Mysteria that much. It's a very slow plot. It doesn't have that much in the way of interesting detective work. The characters just don't have enough time to really grow and become the sort of characters you'd actually feel bad about choosing one over the other. And the just overall plot of the game, while it does itself all right down the individual routes, once you get to the true end, it just kind of falls apart, and I didn't like it. I don't think it's worth the time. I feel like I wasted my time playing through it. It's not that good. Sorry. This has actually been getting pretty good reviews. Like, it hasn't actually gotten below a 7 on VNDB so far. I don't know what the deal is with that. I honestly think the game's a lot lower than a 7. Probably a 5. But I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. And I don't really think it's worth the effort to go through. And that seems to be how I be with every Otome game recently. It's just, I haven't found a good one. Damn it. Like, I should probably go and play Code Realize, because everybody talks that one up, and it actually shows up pretty high on the VNDB list. But I've only played a couple of Otome games. I admit this, but I just, for the life of me, apparently can't seem to pick out a good one to save my life. So, there you go. I wouldn't recommend it. That's the long and the short of it. So, I'll stop ranting now. I don't have anything else to say. This has been Blue Maxima, and I will see you all next time.